Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. Remember how I've been talking about answering listener questions for the past month? Well, it's here. This week, my guest, Chris Murphy, and I answer a question that one of you wrote in, which means that a guest and I can answer your question as well. Do you have a question you'd like to ask a therapist about relationships or mental health? Or have you seen something about a relationship or a mental health issue in a movie that you'd like to ask about? Well, go ahead and write those in and send them to therapisttheater@gmail.com. This week's guest in the theater is Chris Murphy. Chris is a master's level therapy student currently in his practicum in Brentwood, Tennessee. He's also the first guest to join me in the theater who is actually married to a previous guest. Chris is one of those people who can make anyone feel welcome and at peace because of his authenticity and his curiosity, and I absolutely loved talking with him. He's someone who I hope to spend a lot more time with in the future and who I loved spending time with talking about this week's movie. Also on this week's episode, Chris and I talk about a book that's had a big impact on both of our lives. It's called The Voice of the Heart, and it's by Chip Dodd. If you'd like to see more on it, head over to the show's Twitter, @therapisttheater, THERAPISTTHTR. This week, Chris and I are talking about a movie, A Star is Born, that was nominated for 8 Oscars and won one for Original Song. And just in case you haven't seen it yet, I want to say, spoiler warning. So if you want to see the movie before you listen to the episode, now's the time to pause, go to the red box, and join us again after. Okay, I think that about covers everything. So let's go ahead and dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. For all that too.
Yeah.
So like what was your journey that got you to wanting to do therapy?
What it eventually became was what we were talking about a second ago. I had a therapist when I finally was honest with myself. And then I went into a therapy office and was honest with my therapist, because I also went into a therapy office before that where I put on the version of me that I assumed would get me the pat on the back from the therapist. Like, you don't need this. What are you doing here?
You got it.
And so I went through that phase too, where I basically just wasted money going in because I just, talked about, I want to be a better person across the board. I feel pretty good right now.
Sure.
I just want to be better. Instead of saying, like, if I was really honest with my emotions, said, I am burned out.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do. If I could have been honest from there, I could have saved quite a bit of money. But it was only when I kind of hit rock bottom and sat down with a therapist and came out on the other side, feeling like I was healing, that I realized that was something. Well, you know what? I realized that this is definitely now what I'm going to do. But even before that, about a decade ago or so, and this is 2019 as we record, but about a decade ago was when I first heard about.
I love the idea that you just put a timestamp on this, as if like in 50 years somebody's gonna find this recording and be like, "Oh, ancient society."
When my grandchildren are listening to this, and Grandpa Chris has gone, the way of the dodo. When they hear this, I want them to know this is 2019.
All right.
So in 2009-ish, I didn't even know that the Voice of the Heart existed. But I did know that that feelings chart existed. And so I realized that through that I could look at this piece of paper, and although in the early days I really had to study it and go, you know what? I think I'm feeling lonely. Mm-hmm. I think. And it was a lot of that. Like it was like the first time that you try a new exercise or something, or you try to work out after not working out for a long time. There was a lot of huffing and puffing in the middle of it because I was out of practice in my entire life with recognizing emotion. But that was kind of the start of coming online to actually being a person that had emotions, because I had suppressed it my whole life because I needed to present this version of me that was cool in all situations, and not cool in like the Fonzie sense, but just that I'm okay with whatever is thrown at me because I couldn't handle myself emotionally. And so through that, I started to come online to an actual person, and not just kind of a robot that gave you the answer that I thought that you wanted to hear right now. And so that led to me actually becoming a version of myself that I wasn't comfortable with. And then I showed up at therapy in a way that I could, like, I'm doing all the things that have worked up to this point in 30-something years of living on Earth. And now I'm still doing all those same things, but I can't keep all these emotions bottled in anymore. And the things that I was doing earlier that was successful, it's not working anymore. So I don't know what to do. I'm at the end of my rope, and I need a professional to do that. And it was such a loving way of going about it, that if I feel like that if someone were to have looked at me and kind of diagnosed me the first day and go, you know what it is? You're depressed and you just don't know it yet. So you just need to get your stuff together and you'll be fine. I think that I would have walked out and just like written therapy off as an option. But my therapist was so loving and so genuine and so willing to sit with where I was and not with where he thought that I should be, that I was able to actually walk through it and come out on the other side. And so with kind of both of those, my therapy experience, and then also realizing that for someone who was so offline with emotions and feelings like I was, to actually start to feel a spark of something different, I wanted to help others that may be in similar situations.
What was it like as you were going through your process of that? Like, I don't really know, like, in the timeline where Terry was, like, when she went to school or became a therapist or whatever, but certainly was probably doing some of that during that process. You're trying to get to a place where you're even like, I think I'm okay. I'd like to go see a therapist now, but you're married too. I mean, was there any times where that kind of, did it help? Did it hurt? Did it make it tougher?
Yes. All the answers to that are yes, because there was quite a few times where I would have the right answer. I would know what to do. I would know what to tell someone else to do. I just couldn't do it in my own life. And so I kept hitting these walls of like, I know what the answer is, but I just can't get out of bed. I know that I need to just put one foot in front of the other, or drink more water, or go for a walk. I can't get my head off the pillow. That I realized that it doesn't matter if I actually know all the answers, but if I can't get it into practice, I need somebody's help doing that. So it was an inertia issue for me. So with her, it didn't matter how many degrees she had, and the fact that she was also a therapist. She's got several little quotables that she uses, whether it's in the classroom or at home or whatever. But one thing that she said from the beginning that I really didn't get until a few years later was that even though I'm training to be a therapist, I can't be our therapist.
Yes.
And so for me, I was like, why not? We're paying thousands of dollars for you to get this education, and you can't bring it home and give me some advice.
This is supposed to save us money.
Yeah, exactly. Because I thought that therapy, if the therapist was the professional and they could give you the right formula, then everything should be okay. What I didn't know was that it was a personal journey, and that me as a therapist now, I can give someone a formula, but that doesn't mean that they're ready to follow it. Even if it can be prescriptive like that.
Well, I think in that model, it's the therapist doing the work and handing the finished thing to the client. Versus what actually has to happen is the client does the work.
I didn't like that answer at first.
Who does?
Because
does.
I'm like, and I know this is a very, I don't like the way that this sounds coming out of my voice, out of my mouth, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Is like, I'm paying you, fix me. What am I paying you for?
Yeah, but I've had people actually say that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I have a couple people now, again, and I've just started doing it in the last several months, but I can tell in their eyes, like behind they're thinking it too. Which is difficult, because what I'm learning is that's not the job of a therapist. My job is to not make it okay for you. My job is to walk alongside you as you figure out what's going to make it okay.
And even at certain times to make it a little more uncomfortable.
Ugh,
Because
yeah.
part of the job is in the here and now just to be able to say things that you're observing.
Mm-hmm.
And if something you're observing is something that the client is not aware of,
Right.
then just by bringing that into the room, you might upset that apple cart enough to where, you know, it's going to bring some discomfort.
Yeah.
I used to say when I was a client in therapy that, you know, people might say like, hey, how was your, I don't know if they would say, how was your session, but like, how was your appointment or something today?
Yeah.
And I would always say it was good, but I would always put a qualifier on it that sometimes when I walked out, I felt like I hit the lottery. And sometimes when I walked out, I feel like I'd been in a war.
Yes.
And,
Oh, gosh.
And in both cases, it was good, but it was just different kinds of good.
Exactly. And again, I think that goes back to the fact that good is neither good nor bad. Even, you know what I'm saying? But it's what you do with it, what
Sure.
you learn from it, and where you go from there is what makes an experience positive or negative.
So you could say productive. You could say, did that session help?
Right.
Like that
Sure.
would be, yeah, it was really helpful.
Right.
Yeah, I felt like I got a black eye, but it was really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So having a wife who is she processes externally, so she's always talking about stuff that she's learning. And so her going through her master's program and then her PhD program, I felt like I was getting the same education.
Oh,
because
you cheated.
I know, yeah, yeah. So the first couple of semesters, I knew those answers, but I wasn't experiencing it myself.
Yeah.
And so that's what is difficult when people are like, oh, your wife's a therapist, I'm sure you guys are fine. It's like, well, no, we're humans that do therapy, but that doesn't mean that we have the answers to our own situation, because I can talk to you about something that's going on in your marriage and have some distance from it and be able to objectively
It's
look
the
at
ability
it.
to be unbiased is how we're able to do it with other people.
Exactly.
Like, and that's part of why there's so many rules and ethics and policies and procedures in place, because, and that's not to say you go all the way psychoanalytics with Freud, where like you literally aren't even looking at the person. But like you have to maintain that ability to be unbiased, because that allows you to speak in and observe and comment on things that you couldn't otherwise. When it comes to in my marriage, like I'm the most biased with Leigh-Ann. I couldn't be any more biased.
Yes.
And it's the same way, you know, with your marriage. So I can't even think about things the same way with Leigh-Ann that I would with a client. Like I don't have the ability. It's not even a matter of like I don't wanna or I can't. I can't.
Yeah, I think that an old version of me or my mindset would have been, my therapist also has a therapist, so I feel like that they don't have their stuff together enough for me to now trust them. But what I've realized is I almost would prefer a therapist having another therapist, because I don't want them bringing their stuff into the time that I'm spending with them. And so if they're working out their own stuff, that I hope that means that they are being able to show up for me and being that much better of a version. And so there were several mindsets that I had to change from what I thought therapy and psychology and counseling was, because it seemed odd to me that much like a consultant that would come into a business and they're being paid to come in and tell you all the things that need to be changed because they have that professional view of things. That's not, you're paying someone to come and put you into a place of uncomfortability, you know, as a business. And to a degree, therapy or therapists do that as well. You're not paying them to fix the problem. You're paying them to walk alongside you as you recognize what those issues are. And to kind of, again, you said this earlier and it was so beautiful. I don't know if we were recording it or not, but you said, what was it? That your job as a therapist is to be a professional in therapy, but not to be a professional in their lives.
Yeah. The client's the expert on themselves.
There it is.
I might be the expert on therapy,
Yeah.
but they're the expert on themselves. And so I'm not ever going to be able to say something about them that is true, that they are going to totally disagree with and all that, because ultimately they're going to know.
Yeah.
They get to decide.
Yeah.
So like if there comes a time in a session where I want to maybe position something to a client, what I'll oftentimes say is like, hey, here's something I think I'm seeing. You tell me if it fits.
There it is. Yeah.
Does this fit on you?
Mm-hmm.
Am I reading that wrong? This is how I'm experiencing it. I don't know. And sometimes I might be able to do that, with a metaphor,
Yeah.
which I think is a way of delivering truth really softly.
Yes.
In a way that's a little bit easier to swallow. But yeah, like they're going to be the expert on themselves.
Which is one of the things that I'm learning right now in school is that my job is to not be the expert on their life at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's to be the expert therapist and to keep the structure going so it doesn't go off the rails.
Mm-hmm.
But my job is not to somehow become a person that knows more about them than them, because that would be impossible. But again, that was my assumption going into what a therapist was years ago. Is like, oh, well, they come in and they solve the problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, they just kind of like maintain the structure while you come to a realization on your own, which is why it's not like a 3-session, I'm going to diagnose you and then give you 8 steps to do, and then you're fine for the rest of your lives. That's why it's a process.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that especially in dealing with people in addiction,
Mm-hmm.
because addiction is at its core an intimacy disorder, I can't form healthy emotional bonds, and so I try to meet the needs that I have myself.
Right.
That structure is even more important. When you're dealing with a client in addiction, it's so important that beginning joining phase, like to help them to see, you can trust me. I'm going to be here with you. There are going to be boundaries, but I said to a client last week or the week before, you're going to quit before I do.
Mm.
You're going to decide that you don't want to come sit in this room before I cast you away.
Oh,
Because I'm not going to do that.
I bet that provides such a place of safety for your clients.
And I think, and part of that was that I was trying to let him know, I trust the process.
Right.
So even if, which this is where we're at right now, this may not be where we're at in the future, but like even if I say, hey, what would you think about doing this? And I maybe prescribe something, and then maybe now is not a time that they necessarily want to do that. I've said, hey, maybe now is not the time that you necessarily want to do that, but I know you're going to get there. I know you will.
Mm.
And so there's no part of me that's like threatened. And I'm also saying this about a specific client in a specific time. So I don't mean it in a general way,
Right.
but there's no part of me right now that's threatened. I don't think I'm a worse therapist because I'm saying, hey, could you do this? And then they say no. I just think they're not there yet.
Right.
And they're going to get there.
Yeah.
But it just takes time. And I think it also takes a great amount of trust. And so right now, build it up.
Yeah.
Got to build it up before we can do that.
I found that one of the biggest things that I can do as a therapist who's still learning, and I think this is going to be a lifelong thing, is the more okay that I can be with a particular model that I am that I'm doing therapy under, or being okay with the process, the better therapist that I can ultimately be. Because when I start getting impatient, and I've done it in session already, where I'm like, ugh, I can see what's going on. I wish that I could just say it out loud, and then they could recognize it, and everything would be good. That's not the process.
Well, the tricky thing is you could say it out loud,
Yeah.
and they would immediately reject it.
Exactly.
Because they're not there.
Exactly.
So that's the thing, is realizing it's not the actual answer that's going to benefit them. It's not the whole like Johnny Carson where, before the session I wrote something down and I sealed it in an envelope, and then at some point I'm going to hand Karnak the Magnificent. I'm going to hand it, and then they're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, how did you?"
Right.
That kind of thing. It's that long, slow walk.
Yeah.
But it's the long, slow walk, not being alone anymore. That's what's going to help.
Yeah. And I'll be straight up honest with you right now. That was if I would have come to all of this 10 years ago, I don't know that I would have had the patience for what I now see as my role as a therapist. I would have wanted to push it somehow to try to make it go faster, because patience is always something that I've needed to work on.
Well, that was your process. Like you had to go through
Oh,
it.
it's so full circle.
I know, right? But you had to go through it. And I think that there's probably, many places in your life where you can see that, like, the timing had to be the way that it was for things to go. Like I've said a million times before, if I would have met Leigh-Ann one day before I met her, I don't think this would have turned out. And I don't mean that in like a predicting the future kind of way.
Sure.
I mean, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but like I, met her when I was, I want to say 33, something like that. 23-year-old Josh wouldn't have known how to even talk to her.
Yeah.
Like,
on that, you guys were over at our house not long ago, and we were kind of giving each other's origin stories for the relationships and stuff. And for Terry and I, we dated a little bit in high school. But I freaked out and realized that I really like Terry. But every girl that I'm with until I find my wife, I'm going to break up with. And I don't want to ruin our friendship. And so I totally ghosted her and just acted like that we had not been dating for a week and a half or 2 weeks.
that's not ghosting, that's gaslighting.
Well, oh my gosh. Yes, I totally did. And I acted like, what? Nothing's wrong. What are you talking about? But I am so thankful that I was such an immature high schooler, because that allowed me to, even though I really screwed it up, that when I finally saw her again in college and I was ready, I was looking for Mrs. Murphy kind of thing, that it presented itself then.
So technically you guys have been dating that whole time. Since
You
you,
know
never
what?
actually...
I like it. I like the spin that you're putting on it.
You
Is that
never
we
actually
never
broke
actually
up.
broke up.
Yeah.
We've just been dating since we were juniors in high school.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the way I'm going to remember it now.
It adjusts the number on the anniversary, though.
And that's fine with me.
There you go.
Because I come out looking better at the end.
Oh, man. So you're still studying right now. Now, are you in practicum right now, or you're in internship?
I think officially the way that our university, Trevecca Nazarene University, does it, I am still considered practicum.
Okay, so which just means first semester of doing it. So you've got 4 semesters that you do it. The first semester is called practicum, and it's, let's say it's an on-ramp.
Right, exactly.
So you don't take as many clients. You have a little more of a hands-on supervisor.
Exactly.
And then when you step into internship the next semester, you have more clients. You have, actually, no, I think you have more supervision then. But anyway, you've got guidance and stuff, so
Right.
that it's kind of a, hey, all of that stuff we just stuffed inside of your head the previous, I don't even know, year and a half, something like that. And
I
now
doubled up on all my classes, so I started last January, and now we're February of 2019, so I've been doing it about 14 months.
So you did full-time?
Full-time.
That's what I did.
Yeah. Which, again, in my issue with patience that I was referencing a little bit ago, it sucks that it takes so long to get to the point where I will be able to call myself a licensed marriage and family therapist. But thank goodness for my clients that it's going to take that amount of time, because there's a whole semester where I'm in practicum and seeing clients. Well, there's a whole year of education. And if I was going half-time, that would have been 2 years. And then there's a whole semester of practicum where I have very direct supervision. And then I have another 3 semesters before I even graduate where I'm in internship that I can't even call myself I can't call myself I don't have the degree like you do. So like even on the title card for the podcast, it says what, MFCCT or whatever.
I should probably know. Masters of Marriage and Family Counseling and Therapy, MMFCT.
Yeah. So I will have a year and a half worth of experience before I'll even be able to put that after my name. And then it'll be about another 2 years after that of seeing clients under the master's level but I'm still getting supervision before I can actually say I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist.
So when I asked you what movie you wanted to do, You sent me back a big old list.
It was only a list of 9 or
Yeah,
so.
that was it. We kind of had it narrowed down to That Thing You Do and A Star Is Born.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, hey, what would you think about A Star Is Born? Because while That Thing You Do is in my top like 5, maybe 3 movies of all time.
Yeah, it's my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
A, we got the Oscars coming up. A Star Is Born is right in there. But B, I think That Thing You Do would be a little bit more of a fun kind of watch along.
Oh gosh, yes.
So we ended up on A Star Is Born, which we've seen twice now.
Mm-hmm.
Have you watched it more than once?
I have, yeah. I think I've seen it 3 times now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We watched it the second time. Today's Friday, Wednesday night.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that I thought as the credits were rolling at the end was that ends so abruptly.
It really does. Yeah.
It is such an abrupt, like, I don't want to say anticlimactic ending. It's almost like the whole movie is a bell curve, and like, the climax of the story is not the end.
Oh no, I think that. Okay, here. So we'll go to movie school here, because in the times that we have interacted with each other, I've really liked how I've heard you, whether it's been listening to you on the podcast or actually having conversation with you in person. I love your analyzation. Or your analyzing of
You might
movies.
be one of the only people that says
No,
that.
I dig it.
Cool.
I'm digging it. So I would like to nerd out a little bit on this, because I have a background in the entertainment industry as well. So I like breaking it down.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I don't think that I'm very good when it comes to really getting to the nitty gritty of some of it, I really enjoy talking about it. Mm-hmm. So I would love to talk to you about some of this from an educated standpoint, and then you to be my teacher as well. But my idea behind the reason why it ends so abruptly is that the entire title and premise of the movie is A Star Is Born. Mm-hmm. And so the very last scene that we see is very abrupt, because that's the moment that she is, we talked about training wheels, that her training wheels are off at that point. She is a star at the point where
that's when she comes into
fades.
herself.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the whole process from the time that we see her singing when the credits roll
in the alley when she's leaving work,
in the alley, or when we see,
oh my gosh, her
the
name
title
is
card.
Allie. She's singing in an alley.
I have a thought about that I want to bring up eventually as well. That I think that is even more on the nose, but I don't know if it was intended or if it was just circumstantial. But we see her at the very beginning and at the very end, and it's just the process of her being born as a star. Now, she is becoming a star as the movie progresses, but it's not until the very last moment where she's outside of the other character's shadow and becomes her own, and essentially born.
And then which I don't know, if you're listening to this podcast, you need to know everything's a spoiler. So like,
oh my gosh,
just if you haven't seen this yet and you don't want to know aspects of it, first of all, this is the 4th time this movie has been made, so.
Yeah,
the story's been around forever, and it's all had basically the same beats. Mm-hmm. But like, second of all, I would even say at the end, she's free from the shadow of Jackson,
even if that means a very tragic ending to his story.
Yeah.
Again, okay, I'm going to talk from here on out as if you've watched this movie. I don't want to talk and try to not give any spoilers.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying is spoiler alert. So if you're in with us at this point, you've seen it, or you're like me and you love the spoilers. But she's also free from I don't know if the guy was her manager, her record label president. I don't know who that guy, what his role was in that, but she's free from him steering her towards something that he knows, and I'm not even gonna say believes or thinks, but he knows will be successful.
Right.
She's free from that as well. It's her standing on a stage. She's not dancing. She's not wearing a skimpy outfit.
Right.
And she's not singing about how are you gonna fit your butt in those jeans. But she is singing an original song. Right. Well, Jackson wrote it, but an original song, and she's singing it as herself.
Yes, and I think that would have been her manager.
Okay.
Yeah, because he talks about when he initially meets her somewhere in the middle part of the movie that I can give you the things that you need.
Yeah.
And give you the
There's
tools.
so
And
many
usually that's
things
the
that
role of
during
the
the
manager.
second viewing I saw that I didn't see in the first time.
Ooh, like what?
Well, first, and Leigh-Ann pointed this out, so I got to give her parenthetical notation. But a scene towards the when the movie starts, Jackson's in the middle of a concert, like he's up there on the stage, and afterwards he gets into a car and he's having his driver take him. I thought he was going to get food, but he might have been saying he wants to go to a bar, so he ends up taking him to a bar. At some point in there, the car either stops or goes around a corner, and as it does, it slows down, and behind him is a billboard.
Yes!
Yeah, with 3 nooses on it. And that was something that Leigh-Ann actually saw in the first viewing and pointed out. And so, symbolism.
I don't know that I would have seen that if Terry had not also pointed that out on her first viewing.
Yeah. Well, our wives are very smart.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Also, upon my second viewing, after Jackson and Allie meet, he sends the driver to get her to come to a concert of his.
Right.
At the first concert is where he pulls her up on stage, and he says that he had done an arrangement of her song that she sang in the parking lot, Shallow.
Right.
She comes up, sings it. Oh my gosh, it's this first taste of, what it can be. They leave the stage and they're going to his tour bus. As they're going into the tour bus, the manager is standing on the outside of the tour bus, and he sees her, and you see his head follow her, and his head follows her as she goes onto the tour bus. And you don't see him again until they're on that, rooftop or something.
Yeah.
So he makes an appearance 10, 20 minutes before where he first sees her.
Yeah.
But he doesn't step fully into the story till later.
Now I want to watch it a fourth time because I didn't recognize that in the beginning. It's almost like the buzzards are circling, like even before they get close enough to make it, to pick the bones or whatever. Which he's the bad guy in the character or in the movie because he's the antithesis of what they need to be successful in a romantic relationship, is for her to be pulled away and to be taken to superstardom. And again, that's what the whole story is about, but he has to do it in a way that pulls them apart to some degree.
Yeah.
Even if he's just planting a seed in Jackson's head there right at the end of the movie of why Jackson is going to mess up her life if he stays in it. Which is so tragic. And before we move on from there though, I had to do a little bit of it's one of my favorite movies of the year. I really enjoyed it. And again, as you read that list off earlier of Gravity and Castaway and The Martian, a lot of those have these themes of people being alone and having to go through these things, their emotions on their own, to find success on their own. So I don't know really what that says about me, but I'm drawn to these movies sometimes because I think that there is a degree of all of us that are just walking through life alone. Even though we may be surrounded by other people, we still have to live in our heads, and we have that inner monologue always going. And so to a degree, we can be surrounded by 1,000 people, as Jackson was. He has all these people that love him and they're fans of him, but he's still dealing with these demons alone. The first scene of the movie, he's in the middle of that concert and it's just loud and you can hear the crowd and you can hear the music, and then he steps off stage and he closes the door of his of the vehicle that he's in, and it's just silence. And I think that that's a lot of what it's like for celebrities when they're dealing with all of this celebrity. But there's also for us mere mortals that aren't on stage every night or aren't famous actors, of the silence of dealing with our own issues, our own demons, our own thoughts that are so pervasive that it gets silent. And then what do we do with it?
Well, I think you bring up a couple of interesting things. I think that the first is that I know for me this is true. I don't know if this is a general truth. I didn't know that I didn't have to do it alone. Like, I needed somebody to tell me that.
Yeah.
And that for me was a combination of like my mentor, my therapist, my best friend, my wife. Like, I mean, it took a lot of people to teach me and invite me into what true relationship and intimacy and really like life is.
Yeah.
Like, and I think it's it's like a difference, in John 10:10 when Jesus says, I've come that you would have life and have it in abundance. Like life and have it in abundance. So like there is an element of life that doing things on your own can give. That's true. That's there. But there's also abundance and there's something more. And so for me, like somebody had to tell me, you don't have to do this on your own. Which, if you picture, those scenes of like, if you think about like the Raimi version, like Spider-Man 2, there's a part at the end where he's holding up that giant bit of metal to keep, Mary Jane safe. Those muscles are straining. He's holding that up. There's, I think it's a clip from Batman versus Superman. Superman is flying down while holding a rocket or something. For me, that moment, it had been me for my whole life holding up this giant weight. And then these people coming alongside me and saying, you don't have to do this on your own.
Gosh, yeah.
And then me being able to let that weight down, but not dropping it, but rather these people that I love and that love me, putting their arms up as well.
Holding it alongside you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what it was to me. And so, Jackson was doing it on his own for this whole time. And I think part of, the story of him and Allie was her coming in and helping him to see he didn't have to. Ultimately, I don't think he realized it enough. But then the second thing is, since both you and I are working with clients who have addictions, one of the things that addiction does is it pours fuel on the fire of your shame. And
oh, that's so well said.
Because shame in itself, its main weapon is isolation. It's nobody else deals with this. Nobody would understand if I tried to talk to them about me dealing with this. And if people found out, they would leave me. So part of, Jackson trying to walk through all of this on his own, one may be that nobody told him that he didn't have to, but two was alcohol, pills, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
What shame does is it comes in, it isolates you from the pack, and it just keeps pulling you back farther until you're alone.
Yeah.
Since addiction is progressive, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And it doesn't matter what the addiction's to.
Yeah.
Growing and growing and growing and growing until there's nothing left.
Yeah. And again, going back to some of those movies that I picked, a major theme in my life has been shame in isolation, because I thought that I'm getting it wrong, therefore I'm doing it wrong, therefore I'm wrong.
I am wrong.
Yes.
That's what we were saying earlier, is guilt is I do or I did, shame is I am.
Yes. Yes. And so I've been walking around with this cloud of toxic shame, that I felt like it was not safe to bring it up to someone else, because that would mean that I'm admitting that I'm doing something wrong, or that I am bad, or that I am wrong. And so it wasn't until I was able to honestly have a conversation with my wife, that led to an honest conversation with the therapist, that led to me actually improving, because I just hit a wall where, I'd been white knuckling it for so long, trying to handle things on my own. And the minute that I just kind of gave up is the minute that it started to get better. And that was a process, but I had to give up thinking that I was in it all on my own. So it's funny that you say that. Again, I don't think that you have to be in active addiction to feel that alone and that shame.
Right.
But I think that is definitely one of the reasons why I was drawn to working with people in that area, because it is so lonely. It is such a desperate place. And I absolutely know that feeling.
Addiction isn't something that's in everyone that has shame, but shame is something that's in every person who has addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
because the addiction is the way to get away from the feelings. So I can't handle my shame. I've got to numb it. But there's a guy named Patrick Carnes who is considered like the father of modern sex addiction recovery, and he has something that he calls the shame cycle, which is basically like you start with, you've got a feeling. 9 times out of 10, it's fear, guilt, or shame, but it's also the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You have the feeling, and you don't like having the feeling. So, I'm making hand motions. You guys can't see it. I wish I had some way of like drawing it out. But then you drop down.
Here, I could be like your play-by-play guy.
Boom.
He has taken his arm from above his head.
If we
and now
had a
it's
way to
coming
like
around
draw
his eye
on a
level.
screen, that'd be perfect. But then you drop down in what's called preoccupation.
Mm.
And so preoccupation is something along the lines of, I've got this feeling, I don't like it, I want to get rid of it, and I know how. Preoccupation goes into ritual. Every addict has a ritual that results in them what's called acting out, doing the act of whatever the addiction is. So whether the addiction is alcoholism, whether it's drug addiction, sex addiction, food addiction, relationship addiction,
Gaming, gambling, all of this.
whatever it is, the activity of doing the addictive behavior, that's acting out. So you go from the feeling to preoccupation to the ritual, and the ritual, depending upon the addiction, can last for less than a minute, or it can last as long as however. Because for the sex addict who is their particular brand is having affairs, that ritual could be meeting a person, getting to know the person, grooming the person, to finally, years later, enacting the affair. That's a very long ritual versus, for the, and I'll just speak in sex addiction terms because that's what we work with, but like the person who's addicted to pornography, the ritual could be, unlocking the phone, going straight to the browser and typing in a web address and then hitting play.
Right.
And then, as they watch pornography, masturbating, and then that would be the acting out behavior. Yeah. So no matter how long the ritual is, what it basically is a way to self-hypnotize into you cannot say no to the acting out behavior.
Right.
And so then the acting out behavior happens, which was what you thought was the destination when you had the uncomfortable feelings. Because I have these feelings, I don't like these feelings, I want to get rid of these feelings, and so if I can just blank, then I don't have to feel blank.
Right.
But the problem is that when after the acting out happens, the next stop in the cycle of shame, according to Carnes, is despair. So the acting out actually works, but it only works temporarily.
Yeah.
It works momentarily. So the feeling's gone, and you have this state of bliss and euphoria because your brain gets hit with a bunch of chemicals, a bunch of hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, like all kinds of things to counteract the cortisone that the negative, quote-unquote, feelings are dumping in. So then when the despair hits, well, guess what? Now you're in another terrible, quote-unquote, feeling.
Yeah.
And that's the cycle starts back over because you're back in preoccupation because I got to get rid of this shame that comes from the acting out.
Yeah.
And so you get caught in this shame cycle, which you could call it an addiction cycle. You could call it whatever you like. And then the work of recovery then becomes, we got to break that cycle. We got to learn how to not get caught up in it.
Yeah.
So in that whole process too is the isolation, because it just ends up repeating itself and you just feel like, it's too late now.
Yeah.
I can't tell somebody that I'm caught up in this. Yeah. But at some point the pain of changing becomes less than the pain of staying the same. And that, you call that rock bottom.
Yeah. And sometimes that takes
years.
Yeah.
Decades. Yeah.
I was recently watching an episode of Mad Men, and it was like the episode took place over New Year's Eve. And Don Draper is laying there with his affair partner, and they're in the bed in the afterglow of having engaged with each other yet again. And she looks over at him and says, "What do you want for your New Year's resolution?" and something like that. And he says, "I just want to quit doing this." She says, "Yeah, me too." And so they're laying there after having found each other again, having left their spouses somewhere else. And they're in that place where it's now the deed has been done and that despair is setting in. And they look at each other and they both are there for each other in that affair. And you would think that either one of them would be offended with the answer that they gave, but they both are in the same spot. They have come through that place and now they're in that despair. It's almost the hangover. The next morning, it's like, I just wish I could stop doing this. And they both are in the same spot. And how lonely that must be, even though you're wrapped up in the arms of this person that's supposed to be meeting some
that you wanted so bad.
Yeah. And so that's why it's difficult for me growing up in a place where addiction was the answer was so cut and dry. Just stop doing it, and you would feel better.
Did they show you the Bob Newhart clip from Mad TV?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just quit it.
Just stop it.
Just stop.
Stop it. But that was kind of the answer that I was given growing up was that if you just need to want it bad enough and just stop. And what I did not realize was that's not addiction. It doesn't matter if you want to stop or not. It's an addiction. It's pulling you out from where you want to be. And it's putting you into a position where you're medicating something because there's an underlying problem that's not being dealt with.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what you and I are doing with others in therapy, is that we're sitting down and we're walking through those uncomfortable places and we're dealing with what the underlying message is. And it's so difficult because, again, it was a religious conversation that I grew up with hearing, is that addiction, there's no such thing. It's just you're too weak. And if you could just man up, or if you could just, put the bottle down, or if you could just walk away, then everything would be fine. But it's that I can't put the bottle down. I can't walk away.
Well, I think for me, a word that was thrown around a lot in church growing up was surrender.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You just need to surrender it to God. And I remember getting to a point.
Or obedience, but yeah.
Yeah. It might have been my senior year of college. It might have been after that, where I started to, it was kind of like if you've ever been writing, sometimes you write a word and you keep looking at it because you've written it too many times and you're like, that's not how that's spelled.
Right.
And I remember getting there one time with the word did, like D-I-D. And I was like, that can't be how did is spelled.
I thought the same thing with the word the.
Yeah.
DH,
But I got to this point where I think maybe surrender became oversaturated to me, and I forgot what it meant. So I started trying to engage with people to ask the question, and this is as a person who was either a senior in Bible college or who had graduated from Bible college. Like, what does surrendering to God really mean? In essence, what does surrender really mean? Because it can't mean this abstract idea of just saying to the heavens, I give this up.
Right.
Like when Michael Scott goes, I declare bankruptcy. Like that's not what that means. And it wasn't until years and years and years and years later, because I had a break of 13 years in between my undergraduate degree and when I started grad school.
Yeah.
That I learned in recovery from addiction, what surrender means is that you have tried everything that you can think of inside of yourself to solve this.
Yeah.
And you have come up wanting. If the answer's not inside of you, it means that the answer is outside of you. And if the answer is outside of you and hope exists and other people have recovered, that means A, you don't have the answer, B, somebody else does, and C, if you want to get the answer, you have to surrender to the process that the answer is found in. So like AA or really any anonymous program is going to call it a higher power at the beginning. Some people the program or the group becomes their higher power. Some people, God is their higher power. But whatever it is, it's something outside of you. It's something bigger than you.
Yeah.
And so to surrender to it is, in essence, humbling yourself, practicing humility to say, I'm not getting this right. I need help
Yes.
getting it right. It's much more, to me at least, it's much more practical than I think, because I also had a more limited understanding back then, than what I was getting in church when I just heard. And I'm going to admit my limited understanding of it back then.
Yeah.
But what I was hearing was, you've got this issue, whatever it is, you just need to surrender it to God. And all I heard was, all I got to do is just say, I got to give this to you. But then nothing changes.
Right. Yeah, I'm hearing that, and I'm realizing that I've been working with a faulty definition of surrender as well, because I think hearing you define it more, that when I think of surrender, it's like this just kind of like easy giving up of something, almost like an 80s rock or pop ballad or something, like I surrender to you, and it's just this easy, like I fall into your arms and surrender, and that's all that I have to do, and you take it from there kind of thing. Where what it really is, it's almost like two people or two parties at war with one another, and one finally gives up, and they wave a literal white flag in a war and say, I surrender, because I've tried everything else that I can do to defeat this, and I still can't defeat you, and so I will surrender here and give up and say that, like, I basically have lost this.
Yeah. It's why most of the time, if somebody comes into recovery for reasons that are mandated, and I'm saying most of the time,
Yes.
I don't have any general truth here, but most of the time they are not as successful as somebody who decides, I can't do this anymore and I need help.
It's when we see a celebrity go into rehab over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Oftentimes,
It's because they're getting sent there.
it's because they're being sent there. It's like, you can go to jail or you can go to rehab. They don't really want to go to rehab.
Yeah.
So they haven't gotten to that place of surrender.
Yeah.
And again, I'm generalizing this into in a sense, but that's what addiction is. It's not like it's this pill that you can take and you wake up the next day and everything is now fine.
Yeah.
It is a daily realizing that surrender has to be, you have to continue to wave that white flag and go, I am powerless. And that's one of the tenets of an anonymous
steps,
group.
yeah.
I am powerless over this.
Step one is realize that your life has become unmanageable and that you are powerless to change it.
There it is.
That's your rock bottom. That's the pain of staying the same is now greater. No, the pain of staying the same is now greater than the pain of changing. That's both of those.
Yeah.
And I think that along with that, it is easy to think, or I might use the word wish, that recovery is something that you graduate from, and that once you are through it, you're recovered, which for some people means going to a 90-day treatment center. For some people means getting a certain chip, like anonymous programs. You get a 1-day chip. Some have weekly chips, but most of the time it's months.
Yeah.
And then you get years after that. Yeah. For some people it's getting a certain chip, but to think that you graduate from it and that you're no longer an addict. Which one thing I like about anonymous programs is that you get to define. So like if you've seen in a movie where people are sitting in a circle and somebody says, hi, my name is Josh, and I'm an you get the hi and you say, and I'm a blank addict.
Yeah.
You get to decide what words you use. So, if it's sex addiction, it could be, and I'm a sex addict, and I am recovering from sex addiction, or I'm a love addict, or I'm a lust addict, or I'm addicted to pornography, like whatever it is, you get to pick your words.
Yeah.
But it's easy to imagine, after I've done this for a while, I'm graduated, I'm no longer an addict. But the truth of addiction is that once an addict, always an addict. Because while addiction seems like it's behavioral, it is actually rewiring your brain to where now your brain understands, I don't like feeling this. And I know that when I did that, I didn't feel this. And so now I'm going to think, if I feel this and I don't want to feel it, I've got to do that so I don't feel it.
Right.
And, like dirt roads in the country, the tires are going to dig those ruts really deep. And it's possible to steer out of them, but if you take your hands off the wheel, it's steering right back into them.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, like, even in the movie, Jackson, after, was it the Grammys? The Grammys, where he peed himself.
Yeah, and
he goes to rehab,
yeah.
and he gets sober. And I can't remember if it was before that where he shows up where Allie's practicing dancing, and it was before that. And she says, "You haven't been drinking," because he looks different. But after rehab, he looks even more different. And this is how I saw it, is that he had washed his hair. Because every moment up until then, it looked like, he had poured, some motor oil or something up there, but he had washed his hair and all of this. And you could see, I don't know. It's a movie. We're provided limited information. I don't know if he was sober or if he was just dry. Because there's a difference between sobriety and just not engaging in the behavior.
Yeah.
And so I don't know which one he was.
Yeah. And I think that as an audience member, that's an important distinction, that we have to define it for ourselves. Much like you're saying that when you walk into a recovery program and you go, "Hi, my name is Chris and I'm a blank," I get to say what that is right there. And so because of that, we're even seeing him. He's admitting that in rehab. I'm a drunk, or I'm alcoholic, or whatever.
He says alcoholic, and he says drug addict.
Drug addict, yes.
Yeah.
But we don't really get a sense of if he's dry or if he's actually sober, because it does seem to work for a while, and then it falls away again. And that's such a tragedy, whether it's watching this movie or the celebrity du jour that we hear that's OD'd or something has happened to him. It's like, oh, I thought they had it together.
Yeah.
What happened? And going back to her name, it's like he had all the tools that he needed. Another way to pronounce her name is Ally. It's even spelled the same, Ally. She was there. She was willing to walk with him through all this and give him that. He had the tools to decide on his own, but then he also had her that would love him forever.
Yeah.
So he had this unconditional love that he never got from his mom, who died in childbirth, and didn't have from his dad, that was basically described to as his drinking buddy, and didn't have from his brother, that was basically his only parental figure. But he finally had unconditional love that wasn't in the form of a fan.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the form of somebody wanting something from him. She was even hesitant to receive from him the things that he was trying to give to her. So he had that ally that would have walked through him for the rest of his life. And yet he still couldn't. Again, I've said this phrase 5 times in this chat, but he couldn't white knuckle it enough.
Yeah.
Or he couldn't realize that he had everything that he needed in order to move on from there. He eventually found his way back to pills that led to him eventually ending his life at the end of the movie, because he was too overwhelmed with that unprocessed trauma and all of those addictions coming back to haunt him.
So I think one thing that I said to Leigh-Ann, I think after the first time we saw it, is that one of the reasons why, if you've ever been around any kind of recovery program or people in recovery, where nobody ever says, "I am recovered," and they say, "I'm in recovery," it's because it's an ongoing process that you're never going to graduate from. And one of the things that I like the most about that bit of semantics is that as you move through life, you are going to encounter stressors or triggers that are always going to challenge you in your sobriety. As you move through recovery, you are going to build into your life self-care practices, disciplines, and boundaries that are going to give you the tools you need to deal with and encounter those stressors and challenges. And I think that anybody in recovery, you know, you're going to meet what those challenges are, and then you're going to have the opportunity to use your tools that you've gained, whether it's coping strategies, self-care strategies, whatever it is, to have the choice. That's what I say recovery gives you, is it gives you a choice. It doesn't give you a cure. Pre-recovery, you didn't have a choice in engaging with the behavior. I can't say post. Like in recovery, you have the choice. Now you get to choose. And so what I think was happening there, and even though, even though it doesn't tell us, maybe Jackson went to a 30-day or a 60-day or a 90-day rehab place. He got enough tools to where there were some things when he encountered them that he knew how to deal with. When Allie's manager comes to him and says, what you did at the Grammys was so monumentally embarrassing and destructive to her career. All of us are working double time right now to correct that, to make sure that she is not ruined, but she loves you too much to be able to say it herself. That level of hurt for him was something that he was not equipped. He didn't have the tools to deal with. And so what any kind of anonymous program, 12-step program is going to do, very first meeting is it's called a newcomers meeting. So you're going to get into the room and people are just going to tell you their story of how they got there so that you know you're not alone. Let's talk about how to combat shame. You're not alone. That's how you do it. The next thing that's going to happen is before you leave, a piece of paper is going to get passed around with phone numbers on it, and you're going to get that piece of paper. And it's everybody in that room saying, if you feel alone, like you can't handle it, call me. That is the greatest tool of recovery. It's community. And so even though Jackson was hit with a challenge that was, I don't have the tools to deal with this, what recovery teaches us is to then pick up your phone, which inevitably, if you need to, that phone's going to weigh 500 pounds. It's going to be the heaviest phone you've ever reached for. But pick up your phone and call people because what happens is in our brain, in between our midbrain, which is where all of our emotions live, and our prefrontal cortex, where our higher reasoning lives, when your brain gets flooded with cortisone, there's a trap door that shuts between those two areas, and now you can't access your higher reasoning. So what a phone call does is it, in effect, says, I can't access my higher reasoning. Can I borrow yours? I need help. I can't do this on my own. And recovery says not only that you don't have to do it on your own, but you're not on your own, because here's a bunch of phone numbers of people that are walking the same road and that will do everything they can within healthy boundaries to help out.
I've realized, again, in my experience that I've had thus far, that the majority of the people that are, again, as this is called, working the program successfully, are those that are active in a group of people that they can stay into contact with. And the people that are struggling are the people that I see that are have a tendency to isolate themselves. And I don't know if that is a place of shame or a place of that they're not really bought into the program or whatever it may be. But I would agree with you as well. The people that I'm seeing the most success with is not actually, again, this risks my whole professional future here, but it's not actually the work that they're doing in the session with me. I think that we're finding some great spots to work on and to process through. And so I think that the therapy is valuable, but it's the people that stay committed and connected with the other members of the group.
Well, therapy is a piece.
It is a piece.
Community is another piece.
Yes.
Because if therapy is that intimacy disorder, you've got to be learning how to create healthy emotional bonds, intimacy with other people. And And a lot of times, if you have an individual who, so I'll use a word slip or a word relapse.
Right.
I'm going to define slip as, you're in recovery, you're sober, you have an acting out episode, and you get back into your program and you start working the program again, and it was an isolated incident right now. I'm going to define relapse as a pattern. So a slip can maybe be a one-time occurrence. A relapse is, your bender.
Right. Sure.
So for a whole weekend, for a whole week, for months or however long, you're back into active addiction. The person who maybe ends up in the bender is the person who maybe found success in sobriety and in recovery, but maybe thought, I got this licked. I don't have to work my program anymore, which is a strange way of thinking about it. And I say strange, not in a shaming way, but just, as a person who's able to access their higher reasoning right now, which when you're in active addiction and that cortisol is hitting, you're not able to access that. So maybe unproductive way of thinking is a better way of putting it. But, to think, hey, here's all of these things that I did, my program, quote unquote, that got me sobriety. I'm going to quit them.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop doing them.
I'm good.
And then you lose your sobriety and you go, well, how'd I get here? Well, it's because you quit doing all the stuff that got you that stuff in the beginning. Yeah. It's like, if, I brush my teeth and I use mouthwash and I floss, or mouthwash and I floss every day and I've got really great teeth, and you stop doing it. You're like, what do you mean I got a cavity? What in the world? How did I end up here? Oh, exactly. We stopped doing all the stuff that kept you from getting cavities.
Yeah. And that discipline does not sound fun on the front end.
Well, yeah, flossing is not something nobody likes.
No, because it's a time suck. It takes there's effort that has to be put in there. You can't move on to do something else. You have to stay in there, and you have to
surrender.
You really do. You have to go, I get a cavity if I don't do these things and take care of my oral hygiene. Yeah. And so you get, it's the same thing with being in addiction. Yes, you can short circuit the program, but at what cost?
Yeah. And something else that you brought up is something that, and really it's the only thought that I had coming into the discussion, was that of, co-addiction. What is a co-addict, and what does that do for somebody in addiction? So in the movie, I would say that Allie and, oh my gosh, I don't know his name. What was Sam Elliott's character's name?
I don't remember his
the brother.
The brother. I'm Sam Elliott.
Best voice ever.
My gracious.
Is that?
Yeah, and I think that Bradley Cooper spent several months working with a dictation coach or a voice coach or something
to get that gravelly voice.
Oh my gosh.
Because he was trying to replicate.
Well, he said he stole his voice.
Yeah.
Bobby. Thank you, IMDb.
Movie lover's best friend.
There you go. So I think Allie and Bobby were both co-addicts in the movie. And so a co-addict is somebody in the system of the addict who, not intentionally sometimes, helps keep the addiction going. There were times in the movie, I think about after that first concert, Allie and Jackson go back to the hotel. She goes into the restroom to freshen up. When she gets back, he's passed out on the couch.
Just out, yeah.
She goes to talk to her friend. When she gets back, Bobby has picked up Jackson, carried him to the bed, laid him in the bed, taken his boots off, and gotten him situated to sleep it off. He's enabling Jackson to continue that behavior.
Right.
I even think of, during the movie, there were times where with Allie, Jackson was drunk and she would, at the Grammys, she says into the mic, we're having lots of fun tonight.
Right.
Or I think she said something to her dad at one point too about him drinking, just kind of a brushing it off kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that at some point he's like, wow, this could be your ticket to stardom, her dad says to her. And she's like, he's a drunk dad. You'd have a lot. It's there's a lot of history for Jackson having that alcoholism in his past,
Yeah.
or abuse in his past.
Which
and then
that's similar to Warrior, because in Warrior, Patty was an alcoholic. Tommy hated that and left with their mom. And then Tommy became an alcoholic. He became the thing he hated. Jackson's dad was an alcoholic. I think Bobby even says at one point in time, he made you his drinking buddy.
Right.
But the co-addict thing, it's not just there's an enabling of it, because if you are the partner of an addict, to hear the term co-addict, to hear the term enabler, man, I can't think of anything I'd be more offended at.
Oh my
that.
gosh, yeah.
What it actually, one part of it at least, we could say it one of two ways. One could be water rises to meet its own level. Another could be health is attracted to health. Unhealth is attracted to unhealth. And so Allie, I don't know if anybody that watches this movie looks at her and thinks that she's an angel that was there to save him. I don't know that. Allie was attracted to Jackson, fell in love with him, married him. There was a level of unhealth in Allie, and I don't know what it was. It was a movie. We're given limited information.
Sure.
That something inside of her said, this guy is on your level some way. Because a person who, was not engaged in any kind of active addiction, a person who had great boundaries, a person who did great self-care, and that was in touch with a level of their true healthy self, would not have been attracted to that kind of person. And that's not to say that in the movie Jackson was a bad person or a person who was less than, because he certainly wasn't. Yeah. He was just as valuable and important and good person as anybody else on the earth. Yeah. That's just to say he was an addict.
Yeah.
So it could be that Allie was an addict in some way too, or I don't know.
Yeah.
We weren't given that information.
And it also speaks to the fact that so often the easy answer for those not in active addiction or looking at someone else in addiction to say that you should just stop it. He had literally everything that our modern society looks at as all the trappings that you would want in life. Yeah. He was rich. He was famous. He had adoration. He had awards. He had history and longevity inside of his very fleeting profession of being a musician. And it looked like the only thing that he did not have was someone that would walk with him in a romantic love way that loved him unconditionally.
Bobby even says to her, he's never invited a girl up on stage before.
Yeah, yeah. And he finally found that, and yet it still wasn't enough.
Yeah. And
so the tragedy around the fact that we can continue to collect all of those things, but until we actually surrender, which I think is the operative word of this entire chat, of if you can't surrender to the fact that there's a problem there, it's not going to go away on its own, even if you have all of those other things.
In a way, it's almost like the reverse of what I was saying earlier. If you've tried everything inside of yourself to find the answer and it's not there, you got to go outside of yourself. Jackson had everything on the outside.
Yeah.
He had money, he had fame, he had possessions, he had, I would say, complete and total agency in the world, because he could send a private plane to just get her.
Oh yeah.
There was a helicopter that could take him anywhere he wanted. Like he just had a thought and then it was.
Yes.
He had all of that, and then for him, that one lacking piece of that woman who loves him, he even got that, and yet on the inside still felt so empty.
Right.
That he ended up taking his own life.
Yeah. And it even showed up earlier in the film of the issues that he had around looking like he wasn't perfect or needing help when he was having issues with his hearing, and they were going to give him those in-ear monitors to help the situation so he could hear the music better, and he refused to take that help, even so much to where he kind of spouted off in sort of a diva way. he was when his brother's like, you got to wear these, man. This is what's going to help you not lose your hearing, and you'll be able to keep doing this or whatever. And then he calls him out. Jackson calls out Bobby in a way of like, what do you want me to do? You want me to quit all this, or should I just fire you or something like that? He comes back in a very passive aggressive way, or maybe aggressive way. That even like he's behind the microphone on stage getting ready for the performance, and he's yelling at his brother through there to just kind of, to take a stand, eventually saying like, I don't need help. I'm going to continue doing it the way that I want to continue doing it.
Although a real addict would never say, I don't need help. They would say, I don't want help.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, no, I take that back.
Maybe
They would say, I don't need it. But what they don't know is that they just don't want it, because they do need it.
Yeah.
Which, addict, non-addict, whatever, we all need help. I mean, that's something that I like the most about the conversation we've had so far is both of us, therapy is what got us to therapy.
Yeah.
We went to therapy, and now we're helping others through therapy.
Yeah. And I think that's the fallacy that so many of us have, and maybe even my attraction to these movies about isolation is the hero eventually comes out on the other end successful because it's an hour and a half or a 3-hour movie that has to wrap up in some way. So usually these movies come out with the hero winning. But I think that's the lie of life, is that we can all do it on our own if we're heroic enough.
Yeah.
It's the same way that like so many people that we see that have won awards, that have hit the pinnacle of their fields, it looks like they're doing it on their own, because when LeBron James is playing basketball, he looks so dominant. But what's not talked about,
Somebody's got to pass him the ball.
well, somebody's got to pass him the ball, but somebody had to hand him a ball when he was a little guy.
Yeah.
So he had, how many hundreds of coaches has he had over the years? How many, not only head coaches, but like position coaches and strength coaches, and then dealing with going from when he was in high school to who he is now, business coaches, and talking about all of these people that are behind the scenes, that it looked like Tiger Woods was the only person up there hitting that ball, but it was the accumulated thousands of hours of coaching that he has had.
Well, there's even
up
some
till that
clip
point.
when he was like 2 or 3 on a television show. His dad brought him on.
Yes.
And he has that, I don't know, like Fisher Price looking
little plastic
golf
club.
Yeah. That's something that I think, like both of us are musicians, and it's something that I think for me, I've always had like some jealousy in that which we live in Nashville. I mean, we could literally like spit out the window and hit a musician.
Yeah.
But you encounter somebody who, seems like an overnight kind of thing. Shame's going to tell you you have to do it alone. Grace, to go back to something else that we talked about, and recovery are going to tell you not only should you not do it alone, but you don't have to do it alone. Shame brings isolation. Grace brings an invitation.
Ooh. Sounds like a t-shirt.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Shame, I keep going back to, like, my brain is so visual. Shame, I get the picture of, it's that hand with the finger from an upward position, kind of like pointing, wagging down.
Yeah.
Scolding. Grace, I get the open arms.
Yes.
So while, in both cases, you may have somebody who's dealing with something, negative. Shame's going to try to push that person farther away. Get away from me. And Grace is going to say, just come here.
Yeah.
Just come here. We'll figure it out together. And that's something about recovery. One of the whole reasons why I wanted to start this show was to battle some myths that people have about therapy or about mental health or about relationship issues that they have because they encounter them in movies or TV or pop culture or something. I wanted to kind of dispel those. One of the best things about recovery is the community that it provides you. And it's the knowledge that I'm not alone. There's others who are dealing with the same thing.
Yeah.
And I don't have to be alone from here on out because I get to walk with them.
Yeah.
And it's just such a incredibly beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I love it. I want to rattle off a few things before, just some resources that I had, and I'll include these in the description as well. Just some resources if you're dealing with addiction to alcohol. Adult children of alcoholics. If you dealt with parents as you were growing up, you can find them at www.adultchildren.org. Alcoholics Anonymous, www.aa.org. We touched on co-addiction, co-addicts. Al-Anon is actually a program not designed for people dealing with alcoholism, but designed for people in relationship dealing with alcoholism. And that's at www.al-anon.org, alanon.org. And then Narcotics Anonymous, if you're dealing with drug addiction, www.na.org. As well as the National Suicide Hotline, 1-800-273-8255. And if you forget that, just look up Logic on Apple Music, because he has that song with Alicia Cara, and that's the name of the song. And
Oh my gosh.
it's an incredible
That's
song.
brilliant.
Chris, before we get out of here today,
Yeah.
I've been telling people for a while that we are going to be taking their questions.
Yeah.
Would you feel comfortable engaging with a question that somebody
Absolutely.
has?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't promise that I'll have the answer. But
Well,
I'll
here
definitely
I
give
picked
it a
out the
shot.
question specifically.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah. So here's the question that we have for today. Somebody writes in, "I'd like to find a therapist. How do I start?"
That is such a good question. And off the top of my head, what I would like to say is, I hope that you can be okay that maybe finding the right therapist for you could be part of a process.
Yeah.
That sometimes you may go to a therapist. I had a friend of mine from California. He was like, "I just don't think therapy's for me." So why not? It's like, I went to a therapist and I don't know, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
It's like, did you try anybody else? No, I just figured it was the therapy. It wasn't the
So in
person.
that case, that therapist wasn't for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there may be a therapist out there that is right for you that's not going to be the person that you find on your first go. But what I would like to say is, think about why you want to go to therapy, and then maybe do a quick Google search of the area that you live, the reason that you want to go to therapy, and see what pops up when you type in, like, "I'm lonely, I live in Nashville, and I need to see a therapist," and see if maybe that can narrow some things down. Because, and again, this is something that I learned when I started getting into considering going into a program, is that there's so many different forms of therapy.
Yeah.
There's so many different focuses. And, if my wife and I went and saw a therapist, and then I went and saw an individual therapist for something that I was going to, they would be two separate people that are focusing on two separate focuses and interests that they have. And so my wife deals a lot, probably exclusively, with couples, and she deals with a therapy called emotionally focused therapy. Well, in the world that you and I have, I find a lot of that valuable in using that in my own therapy. But my focus right now is more in addictions work. And so if you're needing couples therapy, you probably don't want to come see me dealing in addictions work. I can point you in the right direction, hopefully, but that's
it's
not
a
my area of
specialty.
expertise and
Yeah,
specialty.
it's a specialty. And in the same way, if you're looking at like medical doctors, if you
Yes.
have a pain in your foot, then you probably don't want to go see an ear, nose, and throat specialist.
There you go.
Unless you're in the Little Mermaid, just because that's how Scuttle was able to determine if the heart was still beating, was by listening to the foot.
Well,
So that's-
again, he was a pretty special.
That's
was
true.
a pretty special bird.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things you said at the beginning was so important, knowing why you want to go.
Yeah.
Rather than just a general, like, I just have some things I want to work on.
Yeah.
That is a great start. Let's try to name some of those things before you start searching.
Yeah. And again, like what you're saying too, if you've got a scratchy throat, maybe the chiropractor, although a great dude or lady, is not the person that you want to go to, just because
Right.
that's not their focus of expertise.
Right.
Yeah.
I think another thing I would say, and it just supplements what you were saying, is to know that you are an active participant in therapy, and therapy is a relationship, just like any other relationship you have. And so if you go to meet with somebody, I want everybody out there to know that meeting with a therapist is not a commitment. It's not a marriage.
Yes, well
And
said.
so if you feel like you don't have good chemistry with the person, if you feel like they are, I hate to say this even happens, but if you feel like they are intimidating you, if you feel like they're shaming you, if you feel like, I'm going to use the words, if you feel like they don't care about you, that could encompass so many things.
Yeah.
But in general, when you sit with a person, you get a vibe. And these are all clinical terms, of course. But like, if you don't feel like you're vibing with that person who is sitting across from you as you're on the couch, then you are allowed to say. And in fact, as a therapist, I want my clients to know they have this power.
Mm-hmm.
You're allowed to say, I don't think this is working out. Either can you recommend anybody else that I can go see that I might be a better fit with, or just, I don't think this is working out. Thank you. I'm not going to come back.
Yeah.
Now, any therapist worth their salt is going to then ask, can you tell me more about that? Because hopefully they're going to see some things in there that they can improve upon. But the important thing is that like your friend, if the first therapist doesn't work out, that doesn't mean therapy isn't right. That means that therapist didn't work out.
Yeah.
So, maybe even, I don't know, it's probably expensive, but even like making appointments with one or two people at the beginning. Or I know from my clients, I actually offer, I'll do a 15-minute phone call for free so that you can ask any questions that you like at the beginning, to where if it is something that's just, hey, this is my first time out the shoot and I'm just nervous.
Yeah.
I just want to hear the voice of the person I'm going to come meet with. Or specific questions like, if they are a little bit more in the know, can you tell me about how it is that you practice? Like, what's your worldview? What's your modality?
I remember when I first went to therapy, I got a recommendation from a friend. It's like, hey, I'm dealing with some stuff. I want to go see a therapist. What would you recommend? And he recommended his therapist, which when I went to see him, it just didn't feel like the right fit. And luckily, the next guy that I went to see a year or two later was the right fit for me. But then what I realized looking back on it wasn't that the guy was a bad therapist. I was just not ready to step into it. And so I think sometimes the therapist training, I think that it could be a therapist fit, but it also could just be a timing thing as well. And also, on top of all of what we've said so far, like us in this metropolitan area of Nashville, we are very blessed to have a large number of therapists and specialties to choose from.
It's like the therapy capital of the U.S.
It feels like it. But my hometown in Alabama are going to have far fewer choices that you get to pick from, kind of thing. So also take that in consideration as well, that if you live in more of a rural community and you're listening to this, maybe if you're not finding what you're looking for in 20 miles of where you're at, maybe broaden that search out. And maybe you have to, I've got one client right now that drives about 2.5 hours to come to therapy, because he lives in a very rural area and he just he isn't getting what he would like there. And so he drives into Nashville every 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I do know that there are services where you can do video conferencing with a professional. I can't speak to any of those. I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah.
I can't vouch for their validity or of effectiveness. And I'm going to use this really intentionally. I don't know of any studies that can show its effectiveness in relation to in-person therapy.
Yeah.
It may be like a supplemental thing, like anything's better than nothing.
Sure.
Or it may be the longer that it's around, the more we can kind of study that. But that's another option as well. Like if you're just in a remote location and you can't get out and you can't get to somebody within 100 miles, that might be something worth checking into.
Yeah. Yes. A service like Talkspace or something like that, where it's primarily on your phone or something. I think that if you have an option of using something like that, it is better than nothing. I've heard therapists actually say that sometimes if it's over the phone or if it's over video conferencing or something, that it's a little hard to read because you can't see the full body.
Yeah.
And so you can't feel some of those kind of in the room, I see the foot twitching, and so I know
Yeah.
that something's going on. So there's maybe a bit lost in the translation of the nonverbal skills that a therapist is often trained in recognizing. But I have heard other people actually using it as a therapy source, that they really appreciate that there's somebody on the other line that's there for them.
I would say it's in a lot of cases, if that were to be added on to in-person therapy, I could see that being helpful.
Yeah.
But like I know that in one case, one of the services offers a plan where it's just texting with a therapist.
Yeah.
And like
Right.
like I don't want to put anything down.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how beneficial that would be. I mean, I guess something's better than nothing, but
Yeah. And maybe you're right too. Maybe like for like my children who are growing up in a culture where texting is their primary
Yeah.
mode of communication when you're not face to face with somebody, versus me that at least it was on the phone, if not in person kind of thing. So maybe as we grow as a culture toward that it will become just as reputable or just as effective as face to face therapy. But right now I agree with you that I think that we have some, there seems to be a loss in communication
Yeah.
that could, certain things that need to be recognized could fall through the cracks, especially when you're dealing with extreme situations like suicidality and active addiction and those types of things, that there needs to be someone that is a bit more hands-on, at least in 2019.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be the old guy,
Right.
afraid to engage with new things, shouting from the porch, "Hey, you kids, get off my lawn."
I used to engage in person-to-person
Yeah.
therapy 2
Yeah.
miles each way.
Yeah. Uphill.
Yeah,
Well, Chris, thank you so much
absolutely.
for coming on the show. Let's say that somebody is listening to this today
Yeah.
and they just feel like they would be able to connect with you really well and they want to see you.
Yeah.
And they live in the Nashville area, the Tennessee area. How can they get a hold of you?
If they want to get a hold of me, I'm currently working in my practicum and internship in Connection Therapy Group in Brentwood, Tennessee. And I'm under the supervision of Dr. Michael Christian. So any Google search in that way. If you'd like to connect with me, I try to stay active in social media as well. And so I'm pretty much Chris Murphy Hub on all the socials.
Which I meant to ask you.
Yeah.
Hub.
Yeah.
Is that short for husband? Is it like
No.
a hub?
Oh, interesting. It's
Yeah.
kind of the hub because Chris Murphy is such a common name that I could never get just like chrismurphy.com or twitter.com/Chris Murphy. And so hub was short enough of a word that I could add to it that made Chris Murphy Hub is a unique word, but it essentially is like it's the place to find. It's like the hub of the wheel
Yeah.
kind of thing. So whenever you're looking for Chris Murphy, just find him in the hub kind of thing.
Instagram,
Twitter, Facebook, Chris Murphy Hub.
MySpace, Friendster.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
And
It's an honor. I really appreciate it. This is cool. I'm on Therapist Theater.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Woohoo!
It's so fun to be able to sit with people that I like, to talk about something more than one thing that I like.
Movies and therapy?
Yeah.
Like, how could that?
Give me a break.
Yeah.
I get to do this? Shoot. Cool.
Thanks, man.
I have to tell you that was one of the most fun times that I've had recording, and as a result of that, it's one of the most edited episodes that we're putting out, mainly because just the interview with Chris clocked in at like 2 hours and 3 minutes. And even before we hit record, we had talked for like an hour and a half. And so I just realized no matter how much people like this show, they're not going to like it that much. And so it's like, it's a win-win-win, because first win, I got to have a really good chat with somebody I like, Chris. Second win, I got to flex my editing muscles. And third win, people don't have to listen to a 4-hour show.
You're welcome.
But you got to listen to it.
I did in its entirety.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, you listened to the pre-edit. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So, we have seen the movie 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
Once in a dine-in theater, which is incredible, and I highly encourage, if people out there have never been to one, they should go to one.
Mm-hmm.
Can I give them a pro tip? Here's a pro tip for the dine-in theater. Order foods that you don't have to see to eat.
Yeah.
So, like, for
definitely.
instance, chicken tenders with dipping sauces, not a great order in the dine-in theater. Because you can get them into the sauce, but then getting it to your mouth, you can't mind the drippage.
Oh, see, I'm not a scoop dipper. You know what I mean?
I don't.
Yeah, but I always like dip and then let it drip a little bit and then.
That's what I plan on doing, but I enjoy
just
the
can't
taste
control
so
yourself.
much that I'm like, that's why I think the second time we went, I ordered the mac and cheese with chicken because it was like in a bowl. And I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about this at all. I can just turn my hoodie backwards and put the bowl in the hood part
Oh my gosh.
and eat it like a feeding bag on a horse.
For the record, he did not do that. That's not what happened.
But I will next time because that's
No,
a
you
great
won't.
idea.
You won't either.
But we've seen the movie twice. The second time in our home.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really curious to find out, like, what are your thoughts on the movie? What are your thoughts on talking to Chris?
Should we tell people that the movie might have to be outlawed in our house because we've gotten into discussions afterwards because I'm so emotional that I get so upset if you are not on the same level of emotion as me. So it's possible that we won't ever watch it again, but needless to say, I get very invested in it and I like it a lot.
It sucks you in.
It really does.
Yeah.
Second time was sadder for me because I knew what happened. And I didn't know anything about A Star is Born like the originals before this.
Oh, did you hear that I gave you a shout out?
I did
In
about the new scene.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. I mean,
Wasn't to me the first time.
yeah, I know. Sorry. But like it is. Like I mean, on the second time, wouldn't you agree that like it is such a clear I don't know, foreshadowing to what happens. Anyways, yeah, way sadder watching it the second time because it felt like as they were building their relationship, I was seeing all the things that like she was going to lose. And I'm sure there's something in me that just identifies with like, how in the world would I even cope if I lost you? And so,
Oh, that's a good question. So do you think watching the movie with your husband like magnified that at all? Or
no. I mean, like,
nah, it's fine.
no. I mean, like, I think if I was watching it and you weren't next to me, you were not next to me, then I would still feel just as deeply, like, along with her because I don't need to have you next to me to imagine how I would feel if I lost you. So, like, I don't know, maybe having a husband made me like feel it more. But I also just think I love movies like that I get really deep into and that I feel like I can feel with the character. So
Yeah.
anyways, I was a little bit surprised that it felt, the whole movie felt sad to me the second time rather than like, oh, it was such a fun, good movie and they had great times and they were fun to watch and then this terrible thing happened. It was like the whole thing had sadness in it.
I don't know if even the first time that we watched it, I would have described it as a fun movie.
Yeah.
Just because I think, and it may be just indicative of the perspectives that we bring, but like the whole first time we were watching it, I had my eye on him and his decline.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was almost like and obviously it's a movie, it's a very high quality movie. So it is, air quotes, enjoyable, but like I wasn't enjoying the decline.
No, and I don't mean like it was a fun. It was a fun watch. Like, you know, we were just like laughing the whole time. But I just like the times when they're getting to know each other and their first, you know, kind of shared moments, and there's different things that they go through that are not terrible. That's what I mean. Like that I was able to be like happy in that moment with them. And I feel like the second time watching it, it made me sad. And that's what I mean. Like especially those last moments. It's like those last moments of their normal life together.
So your other thoughts?
My first thought is more of a question, sort of.
Okay.
When you and Chris talked about, so you're talking about the movie and you were talking about Allie as like a co-addict, and you talked about health being attracted to health and unhealth being attracted to unhealth, which you've said a lot before. So like, I feel like I understand that. But I think something about the way you phrased it in this particular part, you said, that there was something in her that made her attracted to him or made her go, oh, this person is on my level. And I think it just made me question, like, do you think, I feel like I don't know how to ask this in a way that makes sense. Do you think there's ever a time where somebody who is healthy can be attracted to somebody who's unhealthy, and then that unhealth sort of drags them down, but like in the beginning they are? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I would be curious to know what you define as attracted to.
I don't mean just like seeing them and being like, oh, they're physically attractive, I'm attracted to them. I mean, like, you know, I'm
like
making
a connection level.
Yeah, like I'm making up a scenario that there's a friend group, and in the friend group there's one healthy person, and they find themselves attracted to somebody who is unhealthy. Yeah, I don't know. I think my thought when I heard that was, oh no, I think that can happen. I think there can be a healthy person who's attracted to somebody who's unhealthy. But I do think that if they're in a relationship, like it's going to tip one way, and it's more likely to tip the unhealthy way. But I just was curious on your thoughts of that.
I don't think that's possible.
Really?
Yeah. And here's why. Because a healthy person practices healthy boundaries, and they have good definitions. I shouldn't have said the word good. They have solid definitions. They have well-defined, which I guess is what a definition is. But they have
well-defined definitions.
They do. Of what they will and will not engage in their life. Mm-hmm. And part of that comes from them knowing their true selves. An addict, in their very nature, is going to work to cross those boundaries.
Yeah.
And so because of that, whenever that begins to happen, the healthy person will then be able to reflect on that and with intention decide, is this what I want to be a part of my life? And because of that, I believe that a healthy person will say no. Now, I'm also using these terms about as broadly as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Like, I'm using healthy in the most broad sense and unhealthy in the most broad sense. And so I want to say, just because maybe somebody out there is with a person who is an addict or who is struggling or something, to say what I'm saying is not to try to put a label on you, but rather what I'm trying to say is water rises to meet its level. In other words, we engage in relationship with people because those people give us something that we need.
I know. Yeah. I feel all that. I think the two thoughts that I have had as you were talking are, one, that there was a point where he crossed a line and she was like, I'm not going to clean up after you like this, when he was in Memphis and whatever. So there was an example where she did say we're we're not doing this. And even when they first met, she kind of said, you're not going to drink. And if you're going to drink, I'm not going to get on that with you.
Mm-hmm.
So there were some examples of that. And then also,
But then she kept doing it.
but she didn't do it. She told him, I'm not going to get on that motorcycle with you if you're going to drink. And then he didn't drink.
For the motorcycle ride.
Yeah. I'm not talking about like in general, he never drank again, because obviously he did. But like, I feel like I did see a couple times where she set some boundaries. And then I think my second question was, you were saying, if somebody's with an addict and the addict, does something and that person that's over a line, that person reflects on it and decides they don't want to be a part of that or don't want that to be a part of their lives. I feel like that's assuming there's no relationship yet. But like,
yes, and that is what I was coming at this from, is the people are in the place of deciding to be in a relationship. Because once you're in the relationship, it puts a bunch more wrinkles in it. It's not just as simple as, oh, cool, I'm done, peace.
Yeah, which I think that's what I'm having an issue with. Like, I think maybe there's times where the person, the addict or the unhealthy person, I'm not even saying an addict, I'm saying anybody who's unhealthy, like presents as healthy. And so then they get into a relationship and then all of a sudden it becomes clear that they've got all this, they just got some unresolved things and some unhealth. And so then like, I think that 100% it can tip towards it's easier to drag somebody down off a table than it is to pull someone up. That's the illustration that I always use. Like if I'm standing on a table and you're on the floor, it's easier for you to pull me down than for me to pull you up. So I could see a person who's unhealthy pulling the healthy person kind of into unhealth in their relationship being unhealthy. But I don't know.
Yeah, but I think in your illustration, you said that the person who was unhealthy was presenting as healthy, so they're not being their true self. And so because of that, that's what I'm saying is the healthy person has a chance to, once they encounter the true self, the unhealth self, has a chance to decide, is that what they want in their life? And I don't believe that a healthy person would want that.
Even if they're already in a relationship with
because they've encountered the true self. They were in relationship with the untrue self.
Yeah. I think a lot of this, I'm just thinking like in this scenario, it wouldn't be possible for anybody to be in a truly healthy relationship then until they're like way older in life.
But it's not binary. It's not just two categories. It's water rises to meet its own level. So a person will be attracted to a person that is on the same level of health as them.
Yeah.
Not just all of us walk around and one person has on a red shirt and one person has a blue shirt and only blue shirts get with blue shirts, only red shirts get the red shirts.
But I think that's one of the reasons why this is a tough concept. And I don't know why this has never been tough for me to grasp until now. Like I'm learning. I'm still learning what boundaries I need to set. So there could be a scenario where something happens and I go, oh, I dealt with that in a really unhealthy way. I need to learn how to better deal with that, or how to set a different boundary, or how to process that differently. Like I'm just thinking in that scenario, and maybe I was just thinking of it binary, like it nobody is all the way healthy.
Right.
Perfectly.
Well, I would
everybody
even say,
has unhealth.
Yes, I would say there isn't a person who is perfectly healthy.
Okay.
Like let me say that there's nobody. There was one person.
Yeah.
He is no longer.
Yeah.
And so I think, you get rid of that whole one person could be labeled healthy.
Okay.
And think about it as, if we've got, how if people are doing a fundraiser and they draw that thermometer and you color in the red at what level you're at. So if you think about it as all of us have that thermometer and it's our level of health, whatever your level of health is, you will seek out and find that level of health person.
In a relationship. That makes
Correct.
sense, I think. Yeah. So it's levels of unhealth meeting levels of unhealth.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I think phrasing it as in like health is attracted to health, unhealth is attracted to unhealth, made it in my mind seem really binary. So, and then the last thing that I had was just that when you guys talked about, when you were answering the question about finding a therapist, Chris used the word process. He said finding a therapist is a process. And I really appreciated hearing that. I think my thoughts on finding a therapist are really like just a one track kind of a thought. Like in my mind, it goes, you find a therapist that you're interested in, you reach out, you schedule an appointment, that's your therapist. And so I think hearing that it's not always that automatic, like you don't always have that an automatic connection with a therapist, and then that's okay, and you can sort of shop if you want or if you feel the need to. But that therapy, just because one therapist you're not clicking with, that doesn't mean that therapy's out for you. I just think that's comforting, and there's a little bit of freedom in that, like in knowing that I have the ability to choose and to make sure that I feel comfortable and able to develop a relationship with a therapist. Before, just because you make one appointment, you're not committed to that therapist for the rest of your life. That was just comforting. And I think if I wasn't married to you, I don't think I would know that. And so I there's probably people out there who don't know it. So I was glad you said that.
I try to tell all of my clients, you have a voice in the work that we do together, because it's work that we're doing together. And in fact, like, they are doing most of the work. So I'm not coming into it as an infallible authority. And so if they feel like, we're not connecting on a level that can help them, or if they're feeling like, there's just something going on that, I don't know, just doesn't feel right, I try to do my best to invite them to speak up and to maybe voice that, because part of that could be a good opportunity to work something out, but if it does just come down to them saying, hey, I don't think this is working, then that's okay. Because like, our main concern is to do everything we can to help people. And if the thing that can help them the most is to help them find a therapist who is a better fit, then that's something that I want to make sure that I can do. Cool. So real quick, at the end of the interview, I mentioned some websites that people can access in case they need any help. I'm going to put those up on the show's Twitter, which is at therapisttheater, THERAPISTTHTR. So the theater part is abbreviated. So you can access those websites on the Twitter. I'm also going to put up a diagram of the cycle of shame, the cycle of addiction that I talked about with Chris. So you can kind of see a visual of that. And both of those will be on the Twitter. So make sure you go check out twitter.com at therapisttheater, theater spelled THTR for those. I think that's all I got. Yeah. So I guess with that, we'll go ahead and raise the lights. Bye. And say that for this week, the theater is closed.